Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a place where your very thoughts, your body, they're not really your own, where control feels absolute.
Mm-hmm.
We're about to take a deep dive into a really extraordinary firsthand account. It comes from inside what our source calls Blacksite Berlin.
Yeah, and what we're dealing with today is a profoundly personal story. It's an autobiography from someone our source calls the buyer from the world's succession deed 1400.
Right. That's a specific title.
It is, and while our material doesn't fully spell out the meaning, it definitely hints at maybe a larger context, perhaps geopolitical, but the core is this raw, unvarnished look at a reality most of us, we can barely imagine it.
Before we go deeper, it's probably important to understand what Blacksite Berlin actually means in this account. It's not painted as just, a standard psychiatric facility.
No, not at all.
It's described as a tarnished secret prison. And the buyer's perspective is that the staff there, they sort of act interchangeably for different states, German, American, Russian.
Right, and supposedly under the influence of what the source calls an international deep state, that framing is, well, it's fundamental to everything the buyer experienced.
So our goal today is to really get a sense of the buyer's lived reality inside this penal psychiatry setting.
Yeah.
Especially the forced medication, which went on for years, and the interactions, often bizarre, sometimes horrifying, with other inmates and the staff.
Exactly.
And what jumps out right away, really stands out, is how long this forced medication lasted. The legal limit apparently is 6 weeks.
6 weeks, yes.
But the buyer alleges it went on for over 4 years. And here's the kicker, from the buyer's viewpoint. Every single injection after those first 6 weeks, they saw it as dangerous bodily harm.
Which, under their interpretation of the law, carries a heavy potential penalty.
Huge. They calculated it as up to 10 years per injection, which adds up, in their estimation, to something like 450 years of potential prison time for the clinic staff involved. It's a stark claim of, alleged legal disregard.
So it wasn't just a long ordeal. It was, as the buyer experienced it and argues it, an unlawful one, which forces you to ask, what's it like for someone trapped like that, where basic rights just seem to evaporate?
Let's start where that ordeal began, what the buyer actually calls the deflowering, their first forced injection.
Right.
They're in isolation. The door opens. 9 nurses come in.
9
nurses. 2 grab each arm, 2 grab each leg, holding them down. The 9th nurse gives the injection. In the buttocks.
And there's a detail there that's just chilling. The nurse apparently said, quite explicitly, if I resist next time, it will always be like this.
Wow.
According to the buyer, that single threat, that statement, it had this profound psychological effect. It basically shut down any physical resistance for the next 4 years. A constant, brutal reminder of who held all the power.
4 years. Way, way longer than that 6-week legal limit. The buyer calls them hell years. Feeling like they were in the zombie mode.
Yeah, that phrase comes up a lot.
An invasion of the mind, they say. Like their own thoughts, their personality were under attack.
It really makes you think, what does that do to someone long term when your own mind, the very core of you, feels compromised? The buyer insists their spirit wasn't broken, but this constant assault on their thinking? It sounds like a kind of mental solitary confinement.
And the twist is, later on, in an official assessment, a Gutachten, it apparently claimed the forced medication period had expired way back.
Right.
And that the buyer was taking it voluntarily, which the buyer calls a blatant lie. They remember staff always saying things like, I have no choice.
And there was actually this brief period, about 4 months, where the medication accidentally stopped.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a gap. And the buyer describes starting to feel, normal again, thinking maybe it was finally over.
Hopeful.
Exactly. But then a nurse apparently just admitted they'd forgotten the dose. And the dread just came crashing back. It suggests, at best, a really inconsistent system, maybe worse.
Let's talk about the drugs themselves. The arsenal. It started with Haldol at maximum dose.
Maximal dosage, yes. The buyer described Haldol as an absolute zombie drug.
What did that mean in practice?
Well, things like uncontrolled drooling, a real inability to socialize, to even hold a conversation, feeling incredibly slow, sedated, always hungry, always tired.
But restless, too.
Paradoxically, yes. This internal restlessness that led to constant pacing. The buyer talks about walking this, 20-meter loop on the ward over and over, a psychiatry victim pacing, plus physical things like hand and arm cramps, needing to keep their hands clenched, restless leg syndrome at night, legs twitching constantly, and focus. Impossible. Reading even one page was a huge struggle. Forget films, forget games. It sounded like total incapacitation.
Not treatment incapacitation.
Yeah.
Then they switched drugs to Risperdal.
Risperdal, again at the maximal dosage allowed. The buyer said the effects were similar to Haldol, the zombie feeling, the sedation, but maybe without the drooling or the severe cramps.
But new side effects came with it.
Oh, yes. Equally severe, maybe worse in some ways, muscle atrophy, for one, and significant weight gain. The buyer went from being underweight, around 50 kilograms, up to 90 kilograms over those 4 years.
Wow, that's a huge change.
Huge. And it changed their body shape dramatically. Increased abdominal girth. They used the phrase beetle-like figure, thin arms and legs, thick stomach.
And there was more, wasn't there? Something about vision.
Yeah, altered intraocular pressure. Their vision changed daily, making wearing glasses impossible. But maybe the most intrusive effect, the most dehumanizing, was the chemical castration. Impotence.
Right.
The buyer describes, well, self-pleasure resulting in only air. A shocking, unpleasant sensation. This wasn't just about physical health. It hit right at identity, connection. They mentioned seeing a beautiful woman on TV and feeling nothing like looking at a car. Recognizing beauty, but devoid of feeling.
That's profound. It really makes you consider the cost.
The human cost, exactly.
And later there was another switch to Exeplion.
Yes, Explion, same active ingredient as Risperdal, but it's a longer-acting injection given every 4 weeks, so fewer injections, which was maybe a small mercy.
That's the side effects.
Continued, unabated. For another, as the buyer puts it, 3 unbearable years.
So, beyond the drug's effects, the active injection itself sounds like it was traumatic.
Consistently traumatic, yeah. The buyer recounts several really concerning incidents.
Like what?
Like a nurse seeming uninterested in injecting air, causing pain for days. Another time, a nurse hitting a nerve.
Oh, no.
And injecting anyway, despite the buyer immediately shouting out in pain. Described as an excruciating burning line from toe to head, lasted for days.
That's horrific.
And other things, injections done too quickly, causing 3 days of pain. Disinfectant being sprayed and injected along with the drug, causing more burning.
It sounds like just constant fear and uncertainty. This perceived incompetence he mentioned.
Exactly. The buyer called it Russian roulette. It paints a picture of systemic failure, or at least widespread issues. They even mention a nurse failing 6 times to draw blood.
6 times.
6 times, complaining the whole time before another doctor stepped in and got it first try. It just chips away at any sense of safety or trust, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So how did the fiend's medication finally end?
It ended after a long, agonizing conversation with the senior doctor at a place called Wilhelm Sander House. The buyer felt they essentially had to perform to prove they weren't crazy anymore, just to stop the injections after more than 4 years.
But then came the real shocker, right? Much later.
Much later. This is maybe the most profound betrayal. The buyer finally got a written assessment over 10 years later.
10 years.
10 years. And it stated that the legal basis for the forced medication had already expired some time ago. The clinic had allegedly continued it unlawfully.
So all that effort to prove sanity.
Completely irrelevant. If they'd known, if the clinic had followed the apparent legal expiry, they could have just refused. But that information was withheld, according to this account.
That's all right, yeah. A massive breach of trust and rights.
It really challenges assumptions about accountability, about oversight in these places, doesn't it? Even within supposed legal frameworks.
So looking at the bigger picture then, what's the buyer's overall take on psychiatric meds based on this?
Well, it's incredibly harsh and unvarnished. The buyer basically says psychopharmaceuticals make patients fat, lazy, stupid, and impotent.
Strong words.
Very. From their perspective, these drugs don't cure madness, they just sedate, make people less dangerous maybe, but not less crazy.
So it's seen as, what, control?
Control and a business for psychologists, for big pharma. Offering, as the buyer puts it, mother's tranquilizers to a public that's overwhelmed by the insane, while the people actually labeled insane have no real advocates. They observe patients on huge cocktails of drugs, like 10 different meds a day.
Still delusional.
Still experiencing delusions, still hearing voices, which just reinforced the buyer's view that these drugs weren't fixing the underlying issues.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit. Beyond the medication, what was life like on the ward itself? Station 10B. Among the other inmates.
Yeah, Station 10B. The buyer had a rough start there, understandably viewing the staff as dead enemies after the isolation experience.
And the staff thought the buyer wouldn't remember the isolation.
Apparently so. They seemed surprised the buyer had vivid memories of everything, which is interesting. But the ward itself housed quite a cast of characters. Their stories really add another layer to this picture of Blacksite Berlin.
Tell us about some of them.
Okay, first there was the Ukrainian bull. Big guy, physically imposing, like 120 kilograms, muscle-bound. An ex-boxer, converted to Islam.
And why was he there?
Tragically, he'd killed his mother's new partner, described as a Nazi, apparently in a drug-fueled rage, an act he deeply regretted. He was generally functional day to day.
Did you want to get out?
He desperately wanted to be released to go fight for Ukraine against Russia, but that request was denied.
Okay. Who else?
Then there was the poison dwarf. A small elderly patient described as sexually aggressive. He ran an illegal kiosk out of his room.
An illegal kiosk inside the facility.
Yeah, selling snacks, drinks, whatever, at double the price. Apparently quite annoying, always scolding people over little things, causing conflicts. It does make you wonder about the environment, allowing that kind of thing to go unchecked.
And what happened to him?
His behavior eventually led to his death. He apparently made sexual advances towards a younger, athletic Arab inmate, who then struck him hard on the nose. The report suggests the first blow was fatal, the bone piercing the brain. The attacker then continued the assault while he was on the ground.
Grim. And the aftermath.
Two unsettling things. First, about 5,000 euros in cash. Profits from his kiosk hidden in a photo album just vanished from his room during cleanup. The buyer suspect staff took it. Second, the murderer moved to another station and then released after only 2 years, which seems incredibly lenient for a fatal assault. There was even a press article confirming the incident in Berlin-Wittenau.
2 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other cases that stand out?
There was the one nicknamed Lightning Speed Progress. Another murderer killed his own mother in a delusion, claiming it had to be, got caught trying to hide the body.
And why lightning speed?
Because, to the absolute astonishment of other patients, he was released after only 1 year. Into self-catering, allowed outings, Lichtgeschwindigkeit, light speed. The buyer noted the bitter irony. Killing your mother seemed less serious in that system than, say, defending your mother.
That's what would contrast anyone else.
Oh, yeah. The gigantic foreign legionnaire. A German guy, 2 meters tall, served in the Bundeswehr in Kosovo, then the French Foreign Legion. Decorated killer in combat situations.
And in the Blacksite 4.
A delusional murder committed back in Germany. Despite that history and his combat record, he was released after 5 years.
And he came back.
He did. His probation was revoked because he said something in therapy like, "The demons are coming over Berlin." Clearly psychotic. The buyer describes him as pathologically religious, believed he was Jesus reborn, that he'd killed Hitler's rebirth. Constantly talking devils, demons, watching the movie Constantine daily, seeing it as real.
So clearly deeply disturbed and dangerous.
You'd think so. Trained killer, no apparent inhibitions, killed someone unsuspecting from behind in delusion. Yet. The psychologists apparently deemed him harmless, released again after another 2 years. They'd even banned him from church visits because it fueled his delusions. It just raises huge questions about risk assessment, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Harmless. Wow. Who else was on 10B?
There's Voodoo Ray, an African man with deeply held voodoo beliefs. He'd sought help from a German pastor, fearing curses from back home. He wanted the pastor to perform a voodoo anti-spell.
Which the pastor presumably wouldn't do.
Right, refused. And Voodoo Ray, apparently in a voodoo-induced rage, murdered the pastor, brutally, left him unrecognizable. It's another case that makes you ask how a Western mental health system even begins to deal with such deeply ingrained cultural or spiritual beliefs when they lead to violence.
And his adjustment to the facility.
Well, interestingly, when he first arrived, other patients had to show him how to use a Western toilet. Flushing, the brush, everything. He was completely unfamiliar.
Despite the horrific murder.
Despite that, yes. And he also received early parole and self-sufficiency after only about 5 years.
5 years for that. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's one more you mentioned, the loyal one or not.
Yes. This was someone the buyer really disliked, called him a Blacksite creep. This guy outwardly praised the institution, even praised chemical castration as helpful for him.
What?
But, paradoxically, he was apparently frequently engaging in homosexual relationships on the ward and exhibited extreme sexual urges privately. The buyer mentions hearing about child abuse fantasies, baby porn, detailed plans for abduction and rape, even having set up what the source calls a Fritzelkeller.
A Fritzelkeller, that's a chilling reference, implying a hidden space for captivity.
That's the implication, yes. A setup in an isolated property he owned. So this massive hypocrisy. Publicly praising chemical castration for his urges, while privately being sexually active and harboring these incredibly disturbing fantasies and plans, the buyer saw his outward behavior as a total performance for the psychologists.
And there's a connection here to a real case, isn't there, according to the source?
Yes, and this is presented as a conspiracy fact by the source. This same patient was allegedly a suspect in a very high-profile missing child case, the Inga case, a 5-year-old girl who disappeared near Stendal in 2015.
He was a suspect.
Allegedly, and reportedly possessed a diary detailing fantasies matching the case, plus that Fitzel-Keller setup.
And it goes further.
It does. The really unsettling part is that, according to the buyer who heard it secondhand, this patient allegedly confessed to his lover on the ward in a weak moment, confessed where he buried Inga's body, even showed the spot on Google Maps on a smuggled phone.
He confessed to the murder and the location.
That's the claim relayed to the buyer. And despite all this, the suspicion, the diary, the alleged confession, despite being brought back to Blacksite Berlin for a short time when the media was focused on him, supposedly for his protection, he was released again on probation.
Still free.
Apparently so. It's just the contrast between the alleged horrific crimes, the supposed confession, and his continued freedom. It raises profound questions about the system, doesn't it? About investigation, assessment, and maybe even protection.
It really does. So pulling all this together, the buyer's experience, these inmate stories, what does it all mean for us listening to this?
Well, the buyer's account, taken as presented, forces us to confront some deeply uncomfortable possibilities about what might happen behind the closed doors of such institutions. How systems supposedly for repair could become, from this perspective, instruments of prolonged suffering, legal breaches, and maybe even systemic failure in managing danger.
Yeah, if you connect all these dots.
Yeah.
The medication allegedly going on illegally for years, the questionable assessments of risk, these rapid releases of individuals involved in extreme violence, it really challenges our basic assumptions, doesn't it?
It challenges assumptions about the ethics and efficacy of psychiatric treatment, especially involuntary treatment, pushed way beyond legal limits. And absolutely, it raises massive questions about how dangerous individuals are assessed, rehabilitated, or perhaps not within these walls. The alleged failures seem significant.
It leaves you with a pretty chilling thought, really. If the buyer's narrative offers even a glimpse into a system where legal safeguards might be ignored, where medical ethics seem blurred, and where people deemed dangerous might be returned to society relatively quickly, what does that tell us about control and care in these shadowed places? Especially within that context, the source provides the alleged international deep state influence.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. Thank you for diving deep with us today into this disturbing account. We really encourage you, the listener, to consider these perspectives, these conspiracy facts as presented by our source, and continue your own informed exploration into the complexities of penal psychiatry and the systems that govern it.